Hi, everybody. Maria, Diane, Cynthia, I want to welcome you
Hi.
to the 21st Woodstock Film Festival. Obviously, we're doing it in a very different way. But I think this has actually been really interesting to talk with people and have something more permanent to look back on as far as the Q&A. My name is Alexandra Berger, and I'm a local filmmaker, and I'm a supporter of the festival, and I've been involved with it in many capacities. So I first wanted to start off and just say I loved your film. It's a great film. It's a great topic. And in fact, I am going to show you again since Cynthia didn't see. I'm assuming if you're on now, you've already seen the film, and I am just by coincidence, and I don't have a solid gold clit tank top yet, but I think I will. But I do happen to have a gold feminist tank that I clarification, and that maybe I shouldn't show that because it's very boobish, but whatever.
Rock the boat.
Proud.
Rock the boat.
So I wanted to get started by first, since we have you all here, how did you guys all come together to work on this project?
So I met Cynthia when Cartemquin Films was doing a big series for Al Jazeera called Hard Earned. And Cynthia was on the Al Jazeera side, and I was one of the directors and producers on the series. And so we came to know each other through that whole process, although we had known we'd known each other before, but never worked together.
My days of ITVS, so, and I was always I always loved Maria's work, so.
And then Diane and I came to know each other working on a film I made about Hispanic girls in soccer called In the Game.
Yeah, so Maria was the first person to give me a chance to work on a doc, and that was In the Game. And I just remember when she would talk about her future film and about female desire. It'd be such a cool film to work on. So I really like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember this is sort of a funny story. Diane and I were at a big screening for In the Game, and it was for high school kids. And they finished watching the film, and then they all asked questions. And this was before I started actually shooting The Dilemma of Desire. One of the first questions somebody asked was, "What's your next film?" And I know Diane was sitting there, and I was sitting there, and I was thinking, now what am I going to say? I'm making a film about the clitoris, and then like everybody in the audience would go, and the teachers would faint. And anyway, I don't even remember what I said, but I remember Diane like thinking, what is she going to say?
Right. So Maria was on stage in front of hundreds of kids, and I was in the audience. And I remember thinking, just like Maria said, is she going to say it? Is she going to say it?
But did she, Diane, do you remember, did she?
She referred to it, but not in she didn't say clitoris, let's say.
So nobody fainted.
No. And what happened over the years then, when I would be out with friends or something, people would say to me, what film are you working on? And I would always say, I'm going to answer you. And when I do, please remember you asked, because, anyway, it's like you can cut that part out.
Okay, well, while we're on the topic, of course, we're all women here, but I think this film will appeal equally to men, but still I wanted to know what drew you to the topic in the first place. Like, what was your initial luring in, and that would be.
So I was looking for my next film after In the Game, and I read a book by a writer named Daniel Bergner called, I think it's called The Science of Female Desire, What Do Women Want? And I optioned the book after reading it to turn it into a documentary film. And in the course of doing my research for a year, decided that I wasn't going to follow his book, and so let the option go. But what was most interesting to me from his book was, after going around the country and talking to scientists who were studying female desire with women as subjects, right? All of them said women have as robust a sex drive as men. They're simply told lies about it to reinforce patriarchal structures. And I remember thinking, okay, as a filmmaker, that it wasn't that women have a robust sex drive interested me. What interested me is the lies were told about it and all of the ways in which, in this was 2013 when I started this, women, things get in the way of women having agency over that desire and over their own bodies. So that was really what was most interesting to me around that, is that how could this still be happening now, right? And if I look back on that time, 2013 seems like such a euphoric, idyllic time, right? Compared to where we are now. And it's just gotten worse in terms of all people having agency over their bodies and feeling safe in their bodies. And I feel all of that is really connected in the film. It's not just about sexual pleasure, but rather about human beings having control over their own bodies and knowledge of their own bodies and feeling safe in their bodies.
And when I first, Justine Nagan, when I was at Al Jazeera, sent me, she was at Kurtemquin at the time, and she sent me the Maria's Deck. And I thought, oh, this is a fantastic film, and really goes to places that no other film, no other feminist film really had gone to. But of course, it wasn't really right for Al Jazeera, a very, a Middle Eastern Muslim-owned company, but we stayed in touch about it. And I think for me, one of the important aspects of the film is that not only that should we have agency over our own bodies, but it's also the real pathway to equality. I mean, if all people don't have agency, how can we all be equal? So that always struck me. And, the US, we often want to think that we're so advanced in terms of, striking out the patriarchy, but we're just not. I mean, we haven't even passed an equal rights amendment federally, and we have a long fight to go. But it's interesting. In the course I realized in the course of early days of getting involved with the film that I couldn't say the word clitoris. It was I had never really said it aloud, and now it's like and I thought, why can't this is an organ within my own body, and it's like the shame that we're taught from just being from early childhood. So it's a film that completely, from me personally, has completely transformed the way I believe, and so many aspects of my own life. So
for me too, the pathway to the tie from female desire and agency over your body and the connection to equality was most important to me. I have 3 daughters, young adult daughters, and I remember Maria saying, we thought we took care of female equality years ago in the 60s, and we're here talking about it now. And I'll never forget seeing that picture of the president and all these people signing papers about abortion and Planned Parenthood, and not one woman and not one person of color. And like, here it is, 2020, and still we haven't reached the point where we can speak about our own bodies. So for my daughters, I really felt I wanted to do that for them. And then also the shame, like Cynthia and Maria said, I'm older, and it's so funny to talk to my friends and they can't say the word. And just like Cynthia, I had never really said the word clitoris many times either in natural conversation. And when I first told some of my friends about the film or just showed them clips, just the embarrassment and shame to say the word, it really was so sad. But once we talked about the film and some watched it, the freedom to speak about it was just amazing. But really, I saw the power of the film. Yeah.
Well, and so, I mean, I love it. I honestly, I mean, I've said the word clit many times, I think, but not clitoris. I don't think that is really commonly used in English. But again, I mean,
Sadly.
word and yet not commonly used, you know, and yet also part of our bodies. So, I mean, I was so fascinated by that. And also, Cynthia, I really am drawn to what you said about like the idea of how can we truly be equal as humans unless our genderized parts are considered equally known and equally discussed and on equal footing. And I do, you know, anyway, I'm super fascinated by that, and I was super fascinated by the film. I am curious how you found many of the people
Ah.
that you followed, and also even the people that you chose to learn about clitorises with.
Clitori.
So initially in the year that I spent starting to think about how I would turn this into a film, I think Sophia Wallace was one of the first people I found because of her work, Cliteracy, the 100 Natural Laws. It comes up pretty quickly if you Google anything around the clitoris. And I also had known about Lisa Diamond and was very interested in her work and the whole notion of sexual fluidity. And I remember when I was reading about Lisa, you know, again, back in 2013, 2012, we didn't have the language about fluidity and, you know, being gender fluid hadn't really risen to the top of conversations yet, right? And it struck me how ahead of her time Lisa's scholarship was, because she suspected this 20 years ago, was that gender was something that was fluid, right? That you weren't one thing, and you know, and so I always thought about that the world has caught up to her research in an incredible way, right? So I found, you know, Sophia and Lisa, and then we started doing some filming. Cynthia and I went in 2016 to film with Sophia Wallace, because as you know, as a filmmaker, you just have to get started and start somewhere. You know, I think about it as fishing. You kind of throw out a big net and then see what you bring in. And what you bring in always helps you figure out where to go next. And so we were given kind of, you know, referrals, or you need to speak to this person, they're doing incredible work, that kind of thing. And we ended up being introduced to Stacey Dutton through Sophia Wallace. And we're finally able to get to Atlanta at Agnes Scott College and interview her and film with her, and she's an amazing person. And then when we were in a creative meeting with Gordon Quinn, who's the creative director of Kurtumpkin Films, he said, you know, I really think you want to find women for whom the work of at this point it was 3 women, the women you have resonates, right? You can see it in their lives, right? Because the women you've chosen, Sophia, Stacy, Lisa Diamond at that point, T. Chang didn't come on till later, they all easily talk about these issues. It's not hard for them to talk about, right? This is their work. But you want to follow and investigate the lives of women who don't talk about it easily, so that we can see what it means, what their work means in their lives. And so Diane and Cynthia and I got together on that, and then I'll stop talking now and let one of you pick up how we convened a group of women to get together.
Yeah, so we gathered a list of as many women that we knew, or people referred us to women, and we just sent out an email and had maybe about 40 young women at an event, and we showed a clip, and after that we just chatted, and it was amazing. You would think that all of us knew each other for years. Everyone was just talking, and we're so appreciative of the conversation and to be able to talk about their desire, to talk about their confusion, to talk about we as older women, how has our sex life been, how have we, it was just so. Afterwards, we had a questionnaire and asked if anyone would like to participate or think about participating in this film to complete the questionnaire. And then we did some test interviews with different folks, and then came down to at least 4 of the 5 that Corey came on later.
I wanted to find, I wanted the women, the 5 women, to really reflect the diversity of humanity, right? And so I didn't want them all to be heterosexual white women, right, who are having bad sex. I really wanted that diversity reflected. And so I had to go looking for Koriyama, and I had to ask a lot of people I knew in the queer community and in the communities of color who's doing work in these communities. And so through that research, I was referred to 2 or 3 other women that we went and interviewed. And then Koriyama was the final one that we chose. So we had those 5.
Yeah, and many along the way, the whole timeline of developing and then finally getting into production, you know, many people asked us, "Are you going to? This should be international. This should be. What about trans women? What about?" And we felt that you know, as we all know, as filmmakers, you can't put too much into 90 minutes, and we've packed a lot into our 90 minutes, but we also felt, you know, this is a film that starts the conversation. This is passing the baton to many other filmmakers internationally, and also to people of, you know, non-traditional gender identities and non-binary and trans, to take this and tell their own stories and make their own films. None of us are trans women. None of us, you know, we all identify a certain way. We're not international. We're Americans. This is the start of a conversation that we hope that goes very, very wide.
Well, and just to follow on that, I mean, what are your hopes and your plans for the film? How are you getting it out there? How do you hope it will impact people? I'm curious about that. How do you hope it will change things?
So right now, the primary way we're getting the film out there is through the incredible response that festivals have had to the film.
Yeah.
We've lost count. I mean, it's sort of humorous. I will say, oh no, I mean, I know, I'm joking. Another one, because we have so many different festivals, and that's really, really wonderful, right? There's been a bit of a disconnect between the audience love for the film and the embrace of the film on the traditional SVOD platforms. I don't know whether they're afraid of the topic, or they find the notion that women, empowered women sexually are therefore empowered women equally, something they don't want, but they have been a little bit afraid of the film. And I've decided just to keep it in festivals for a while. We're going to sell it internationally. We have a really great educational distributor. I'd like to see the film screened when we can actually screen on every college campus in the country. And so we're going to keep reaching out to the audience, because like you said, it's not just women who are interested in the film. Once we started showing the film, I started getting emails from people I don't know. And they ranged in age from a 16-year-old girl to an 80-year-old man. And the response has been, I haven't gotten an email that said, I hate your film, how could you do this? I've gotten an email saying, thank you so much for this film. So I think all of us believe in the mission of this film, and I want to change the world with this film. I'll consider myself successful the day every single girl entering her freshman year of high school knows what a clitoris looks like, where it is, and what it's for.
Yeah, I think I want to add that we have an incredible impact producer, Shelby Knox. If you remember, you know, quite a few years ago, The Education of Shelby Knox.
I saw her name on there, and I thought, is
yes,
that Shelby Knox?
Yes, it is, and she's wonderful. She's been great, and you know, I think one of our, I agree with Maria. If we could wait, first of all, if sex education could be taught across the United States, you know, which is really important. And if we were taught, you know, not only from the point kids are going through puberty and through high school, but also if medical textbooks in medical schools could get women's anatomy correct, that is a huge first start. I mean, I mean, you look at still in Grey's Anatomy or something, the clitoris barely exists, or it's like Stacey Dutton says in the beginning of the film, it's like they've wiped, you know, womanhood out of the text, and it's still true. That's one big goal, is to get women's anatomy correctly depicted in medical textbooks, but also in sex education. And that sex education is really important. If boys and girls and however you might identify gender-wise, we have respect for all bodies. That's a huge first start in stopping the shame and stopping, crimes, sexual crimes, and stopping, bullying, all kinds of things. If we're taught to respect our bodies and each other, that's a huge step that this film can, and I think this film is a tool for that.
Yeah, and
I
if
mean,
the film could be used for as a tool for conversation between families, for a mom to
Yeah.
speak with her daughter, or a mom with her son,
Yeah.
or even with her husband, I think that is a big accomplishment too. Yeah.
I
I
mean,
told,
think about this. Just let me imagine we were all girls once. Imagine how the lives of young girls would change if they were taught about their bodies in a way that taught them about their bodies as a source of power. And that this is where your pleasure comes from. And you need to know and understand your body. Think about how that would change the choices young girls make when they decide to be sexual. It's not then just about being receptacles of someone else's desire, but rather an initiator of your own desire, and that where you have needs and choices, and you're entitled to get something in return if you share your body with someone else. If that's how we taught girls, think about how their lives would change.
and sexuality is normal, healthy. It is part of who we are as human beings.
Right. So what do you think about the younger generation? I mean, there is, the idea of what you were talking about, Lisa Diamond talking about, the sort of sexual fluidity, people not really feeling constrained by titles. I mean, I remember my generation certainly was a generation that where women at least were beginning to fool around with other women. It was happening in high school, and people were trying to figure out whether they were naturally attracted to men or whether that was like a socialized perception that was imposed upon them.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel like that was at least beginning, that conversation definitely began during my adolescence. And I wonder where the kids are now and where you think that they're going in. I mean, because I hear this whole movement about people being binary and people not being constrained, but how deep is that? I'm curious. I mean, do you feel like you have a handle on that to answer?
Well, I don't know that I have a handle on that, but we did work with a lot of young people on the film. In the Cartemplin Films has a robust intern program. And so we always had, Diane and I would always pull in interns to work on the film. They were always really excited about working on the film.
And really smart.
And really smart. And what was really wonderful, at least for me, is that when I would meet these young people, somebody might, to me, look like they were a woman, but then they would tell me that they didn't identify as a woman, and that this is, and so it was like, oh, okay. And so it'll, at least in Chicago and in the community with which we interacted with, I saw a lot of young people embracing, I guess I call it freedom, to sort of just say, no, this label doesn't work for me. This is who I am. And I have at least 2 friends whose daughters decided to transition to trans men. And like 10 years ago, I didn't have 1 friend. So I do think, at least within the community with which I live, and maybe it's a bubble, that there is a lot of conversations about this, and a lot of openness by young people to not accept old, stale ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm wondering, and I don't, I'm wondering how studying this topic and getting so immersed in it, how it personally affected you and maybe even changed your relationship to yourself.
Well, I found out what my clitoris looked like when I was 57 years old and I met Sophia Wallace. And I went to her studio and she showed it to me, and I had a real what the fuck moment. And it wasn't only just for me. I'm a mom. I have 2 kids. I have a daughter who is a doctor right now. She's 30 years old, and I have a son who's 28, and I have a great relationship with both of them, a very open relationship with them. when they were in high school, we had a conversation before they were both sexual. You know, but when I saw what the clitoris looked like, I was so sad that I hadn't had a conversation with my daughter about it, or my son. But let's just start with her. That's her body. And because I didn't know. And I thought, that's horrible, right? Because that's how it perpetuates, right? So smart, well-thinking women, high-educated women, we all, you know, regardless, if we don't know, you don't know what you don't know. So I began speaking to both my kids about the clitoris, and my son's was a really good sport in the beginning. He said, you know, Mom, I'm the only one of my friends whose mother routinely talks to him about the clitoris. I said, well, that's okay. You're going to have, you know, at that point he had a really attractive girlfriend. I said, you'll thank me later. And then I remember him saying to me at one point when he got older through college, because this film went on forever, Mom, what's the big deal? And I said, name a moment past the age of 2 when you didn't know you had a penis and what it was for. And he said, oh, okay. And so, you know, hopefully it's made me a better mother, but it's also, maybe this isn't necessarily so good, but it's also made me able to talk about this without a filter. And so I will talk to anybody about it. And I think that's important to do, because I think all of us need to be able to talk about this in a way that just kind of neutralizes the shame. And because until we do, the world won't move forward. And I, you know, I believe strongly in what Audre Lorde wrote in Uses of the Erotic, that it's a source of power, right? And that it's in all people, but women, it exists in a deeply spiritual plane for women. And I really think that denying that power in yourself is a way that you stay oppressed. And so if you can't speak about it, you can't even begin to fight against the oppression.
I completely agree with Maria. And I do think also that one of the things that the film brings out for me so much is that everyone is entitled to all the pleasure they can possibly have, and the joy and the humor that we found in also in certain aspects in the film. You know, we often, you know, sex is, you know, used as something bad, something, you know, dark, something dirty, and actually it's pleasure is a joyful, beautiful thing, and it is a source of power. And if we completely reverse that thinking, what a different world we would have. What a different world.
Yeah, I think, and for me, I think the film has just made me braver. I did not speak about this with my kids either, or I remember another test, just like Maria was saying about the high school speaking up on the stage. I had a group of my son's friends around. They were all 30, and they asked me the same thing: "What's your next film?" Like, can I say this? and my daughters are there, like, is she gonna say it too? And I just told them, and I just realized I can say this, and this is fine to speak about clitoris. It's fine to talk about sexual desire, and I just felt braver. I tend to be shy anyway, and so just to be able to not feel ashamed, I feel grateful for that.
I have friends that keep telling me, can you stop talking about the clitoris now?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I'm so excited that I can just say it, and shout it from the rooftops. So
Yeah, I remember when we were doing our Kickstarter campaign, I sent it to all my family members, and I said, all right, this is really important that you support my film. At the very least, I can stop talking about the clitoris. It's a win-win for all of us, right? You know.
But you can't.
But I can't. I still talk about it. Because, you know, when you start to think about it, and you think about it, forget about the clitoris, but you think about women and their sexual desire, which is a natural thing, or anyone other than a white heterosexual male. Their desire is what we build culture around, right?
Yeah.
The Iliad and the Odyssey is written about male desire, okay? You know, Penelope didn't voluntarily go there. She was kidnapped, all right? And all of the, you know, Philip Roth almost won a Nobel Prize for doing nothing but writing about male sexual desire and the pursuit of women, mostly at the expense of those women. And so that's okay, okay? But have a woman write about her sexual desire or her being sexually active, then she's immediately thrown into the category of, you know, kind of slut or porn, and it's a shameful thing. And that will make me angry till the day I die.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's just, it's horrifying to me that you can go on to, you can see so many films, so many documentaries anywhere. There's so few about really powerful women. We tend to see a lot about victimization of women, you know, a lot about victimization of women. But to have a film where women start with a place of power, it's really terrifying for people. I mean, we need to, you know, we need to have those films about the stopping of victimization of women, but we need to see more powerful women who are just not superheroes and fantasy figures that actually just exist because they're, you know, it's, I mean, we have an incredible group of advisors who are superpower women. And, you know, and they've been great, from Gloria Steinem to Eve Ensler to Frances Kissling, and who all support the film. And but we need to know these women as much, you know, as household names, as much as any man, powerful man. So.
Well, I've heard people, was it, so people say like, what, this is the year of the woman, or this is the year that women.
They've been saying that forever.
Right. I mean, I guess that is kind of what I'm saying. It's like people will say that this is the, you know, like I remember in 2016 taking my children to the polls, pulling the lever and telling my daughter, I have triplets, 3 11-year-olds, and I told my daughter, I said, we are going to have our first woman president today.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and then dealing with the aftermath of that. And which also, you know, your film mentioned the Women's March, and there's another film in the festival called Surge, and I know the filmmakers did a Q&A with them, and it deals with this very different but a similar topic. And it's just like, what do you think that women need to do to really change? I mean, I'd say like coming at it from the clitoris to, you know, to what is going to help shift the way we even see ourselves, the way we present ourselves, our expectations for ourselves, and how we hold ourselves accountable.
So I think that's a really complicated issue, and I think I say that based on the age that I am. You know, I remember when the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, first came out. I think I was in college, or right after college, and I remember thinking, well, this will pass. And then all of a sudden, there were all kinds of women and women's groups saying, we don't want the Equal Rights Amendment to pass. And I remember thinking, what? You don't want to be equal under the law? And so we still live in that world today. And I think it's a complex reason why. I feel that if heterosexual women are constantly competing against each other for the attention of men, and so sometimes that's what we're taught to do. And so there are some women who feel like, oh, if I call myself a feminist, then men won't like me. And so they feel like joining with other women and other people, not just women, around calling for the equality of all human beings somehow will put them at a disadvantage with the power structure. And so I also think, and I know that this is true, and I accept this, that there are for a lot of people, the content in my film is deeply frightening, and maybe for some offensive. You know, I attacked the Catholic Church. I grew up Catholic. We're attacking all kinds of institutions, medicine, academia, calling them out, saying this isn't right. And I think when you when that kind of change comes and when that kind of pushing comes, it can be very frightening. And I'm really hoping that we're at a point right now between all that's happened with Black Lives Matter and the result of having a man in the White House so grossly incompetent, that people will let go of some of that fear and come together and say, okay, we can't keep dividing ourselves as women. We have to come together because so much of our lives are at stake.
And I think the hope, also there's great hope, and in 2018, when so many women were elected to Congress and so many women of color, and hopefully we can keep that trend going. And a lot of those women that are, a lot of women who were in primaries and running again, like Ilhan Omar, are actually winning. They did incredibly well in their primaries when they had challengers. So hopefully they will get back into office and we will keep this trend growing and growing and growing. I mean, we're more than half of the population. And as women, we need to be represented.
Diane, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Oh, I just support everything that Maria and Cynthia said. I'm just praying for this next election. I think
Yeah.
the women have to also not be so afraid of like labeling themselves or saying I'm a feminist or not a feminist, and just hopefully feel strong and brave enough to do what's right. So yeah, I think what Cynthia and Maria said, they said it all. Yeah.
Well, I think that we're getting close to wrapping it up, but I wanted to ask you just a pragmatic question. So what was your, like Maria and Cynthia, just because I know you, but Diane, I don't know you as well. You come from a very seasoned background. You're experienced professionals. What was the process like of raising money and of getting the funding and getting this film to take off for you guys?
So that's another very sad story. I thought, so originally after In the Game, I couldn't get anybody to support that documentary. And the world was sort of changing in terms of what people wanted, and the platforms were taking over. And it wasn't a film that I could get any support for. So when I did finally get it finished, I promised myself that the next film I started would be one that people would throw money at me for. And so women and sex, that was what I was like, oh, this is gonna be a no-brainer. And perhaps it would have been had I not changed the focus of the film to look at women's equality through the lens of how we're treated as sexual beings. And for the longest time, we got turned down by everybody. I mean, like everybody turned us down. And finally, the people who did support the film were two men. One was our investor, and he came in early on, and he has two little girls. And the other is a philanthropist, Richard Logan, through the Davis and Reva Logan Foundation. And he has been a great supporter. But the traditional funders, all of them turned me down. And that has given me a lot of sadness because in the beginning, I blamed myself that I didn't have good enough trailers or I couldn't speak about the film well enough. But as we kept working on the film and it evolved and the focus got better and more honed, I was flummoxed that we continued to be turned down for funding.
I mean, what made me really sad too is that a lot of people that we spoke to, women, many women, funders, and also in the broadcast and SVOD world, had difficulty. They told us they had difficulty pitching it up the line, at their organizations, and they said it was hard to talk about, and that made me sad. It's like we're in 2020, and and we've all gone through that too. Like as we get very, now we're a lot braver talking about the clitoris and talking because we've embedded ourselves in this film, but it really showed me that we've got such a long way to go, and the industry, and thank God for Me Too, but the industry has still such a long way to go. such a long way to go.
What's been interesting to me is, I mentioned this earlier with the festivals, and it happened when we did a Kickstarter campaign. Diane was instrumental in organizing this amazing campaign. And we got such an incredible response from Kickstarter supporters. Like, they couldn't wait to see the film. And so whenever that would happen, I would think, oh, we've turned the corner. But then when we would go to the gatekeepers, right, whether they were the SVOD platforms or the funders of independent films, the doors would slam shut. And so I do feel there's a discrepancy between what an audience wants. I believe we have a huge audience for this film, and what, I guess, traditional outlets or the power structure is willing to support. And that, to me, is saddening and also confusing.
Just on a personal note, I made a documentary about pornography a number of years ago. So I went through all this. I know exactly what you're talking about, just on a personal level. And I know how complicated it is. So I've been there, and it clearly hasn't changed, even though your angle was very different than my angle. So, you know, I'm really sorry to hear that. I know for me, I very early on just gave up on the idea of receiving funding from the traditional outlets. Like, I just, after a certain number of applications and grants that I wrote, the response was just like, absolutely not, you know? So I was like, okay, I know it's not coming from this avenue.
Oh, yeah.
But
you know, thankfully, Tim and A came in later. They love this film and have been really supportive of Maria and helping us in different ways. And we're doing, you know, we're looking for money every way we can. We did the Illinois tax credit, and actually that's, you know, been helpful too. But it really is scraping along and getting.
And one of the things I think Cynthia mentioned is that we have a really aspirational, huge impact campaign, and we have really great people in place to do it. And funding that campaign has been very difficult. And I remember reading recently that the documentary Crip Camp, which is a fabulous film, has $2 million in outreach. And I just thought to myself, oh my God, if I had $200,000, what I could do with outreach.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's the other sort of sadness for me, is that I think the team and I all know that if we could get some support financially, this film would be a vehicle for an exploration of so many important issues. But you know, you just can't keep asking people to work for free. And I won't do that. I mean, most of the team is women, and I don't think that's a good idea.
so just on a more specific issue, what do you think that you're coming up against when you're dealing with the topic of sex or sexuality? What do you think it is that's making them close the doors? I mean, do you think that it's the topic is female sexuality, and therefore they're closing the doors because it's going up the ranks, and the higher up you're getting, that you're running into men? But then again, your biggest supporters financially were men. So I'm just curious what your impressions are on that.
Well, I think one of the things that we came up against right away in the beginning was that people thought, because it was about female sexual pleasure, that it was about porn, and they didn't want to support it. And so when we got around that corner and they realized it wasn't about porn, there weren't any images of people even having sex in the film, that then what happened was, it's about saying that women deserve the right to be sexual in whatever way makes sense to them, and that they don't exist as simply receptacles of male pleasure. They have their own agency, should have their own agency and autonomy over what they do and who they do it with and when they do it with. And I think that is a deeply threatening idea. I mean, look at what's on all of the channels we all watch. Shows about women who get kidnapped by men who eventually fall in love with their kidnappers. Oh, that's really great. A show every week on NBC, even though I watch it, called Law and Order SVU, which is about the rape of the week. Okay, these are these are important issues in the lives of women because this happens all the time to
Yeah.
women. But there are no films about women as sexually empowered beings. And if they happen to be, like remember Diane Lane when she had that affair with that really cute French guy in that movie?
Oh,
She
yeah,
won an
yeah, yeah.
Oscar for it, right? And she went off and had this like really great affair. He was this adorable young man. What happens after she has the affair? Her entire family falls apart and her husband kills him. That's what happens when women act on their desires. Like chaos ensues. Okay? And your husband kills the man you had an affair with. And somehow that's your fault. Because if you had not had an affair with him, then
It's
everybody.
all your fault.
It's all your
Yes.
fault. And that's the message we get. And so I just think that we're happy looking at women as victims. That's a conversation we'll have forever. But imagining that we might live in a world where women could participate equally in their sexual encounters with their partners, that's a hard conversation to have. And it's not that I don't think there are men and women who want that. I do think there is.
Do you think it's a hard conversation to have, or do you think it's that people who are, and I'm speaking specifically in terms of film, or do you think it's such a hard conversation to have? Do you think it's something that people are not open to? I mean, if you think about HBO, they had that whole couple of years where everything was about sex for them. But, or do you think it is that people, when they're taking a film out there, they're afraid of investing their own energy and time in something that they are scared won't land somehow? And how do we change that conversation? Because when you're dealing with a riskier topic, you know, and it's a topic that's important, you know, how do we get that out there if the people in our own industry aren't supporting that? I mean, that's really an interesting challenge, I think.
Well, I think that's a really good question. I think one of the issues is that for so many, and I've worked on the other side of the fence for most of my career. So producing and the whole really creative end is kind of new for me. And, but you want things to fit into a box, into a niche. So a lot of stuff, HBO was known for years for doing their, the late night kind of sexy stuff, and Showtime has done that, but it kind of fit into a certain box or a certain niche. Our film is a serious topic, and it's really, but it's really more, I don't want to say mainstream, but it is a serious topic, a serious, real documentary. And, looking at this issue of, having agency over your own body, having, equality. What does real equality look like? And, it kind of didn't fit in that niche box, and it didn't kind of fit here, and it was a little bit threatening here. So I think that's also been part of the problem. We've talked to broadcasters that say, oh, well, we could do that kind of subject matter better than anyone. And they were talking about their niche late night kind of stuff. Not what our film is about. We're not about, that titillating late night thing. That's not what our film is about at all. So I think it falls out. It's where people get like, where do we put this? It's, I don't know. It's been perplexing. And yeah, I mean, we don't want to, certainly issues around violence against women are very, very important, but also the issues about what the world would look like if women were really respected, and if we had equal ground. That's really important too. And that's an area that we don't look at enough.
Well, so on that note, I do think we should probably wrap this up.
Okay.
I have a strict time, but I want to say that, as we're dealing with the pandemic and as things are shut down, and eventually the film world is going to reopen, I hope that we can reopen the film world to embrace topics that are different, that are other, that are more complicated to find a niche for. I think your film is wonderful. I think it's super important. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
I really think it's going to have a long life, even though people didn't understand where to place it in the beginning. I think it's a really, really important topic. And I'm really rooting for you guys to have a super long life and for it to do as well as you hope for it to do. And I was
Thanks,
Thank
Alex.
you. Thank you so much.
lovely that today at Woodstock Film Festival thanks you for sharing your work with us and for giving us your time today. And it's been a pleasure speaking with all of you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
It was a pleasure.
You.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.